Welcome to the Enchoris podcast, a cultural management podcast about things that happen in Germany and people should know about outside Germany. And today's guest is someone I met 10 years ago in a very special series of concerts at King Jörg, a club in Cologne. And our guest today is Jan Lankisch. The best way to describe him is his website, which is I Do Many Things. And that's actually completely true. So welcome, Jan.
Thank you for the invite.
Jan is the curator of the Weekend Fest that takes place in Cologne in November 7 and 8 this year at Stadtgarten. And we're going to talk about his festival, the label that is behind the festival, and Jan's work in general. And the context will be today how festivals are facing challenges with costs, other factors. There's a very interesting study that came out by Initiative Musik and livekomm a month ago that I will link to in the podcast, where you can see the problems of festivals. And Weekend Fest is, in my opinion, a very interesting festival. So that's going to be the framework for today's talk. So, Jan, how did the Weekend Fest start?
Yeah, that was 14 years ago when my good friend Jörg, who passed away a couple of years ago tragically, when he and we sat together, we had the possibility to use an by then inactive cinema that was running out of business for a couple of years, and we were asked if we want to do a concert there. And then I met with Jörg, or like I said to the guy who contacted us, that once we bring in gear and everything and the PA, it would make sense to do more than one show because it's just not very efficient. And then we were next thing we were sat in an Italian restaurant, and we wrote down a list of our favorite bands and artists on a napkin, and that was the start of the festival. And I mean, it was like the idea was like, let's try it. Let's see, because we felt at this point there are things in Cologne, but like we didn't feel that this particular thing that we wanted to have in the city didn't exist. So we realized we have to do it ourselves. And it was planned as a one-off, and here we go.
15 years almost.
15 years later, yeah. It's a long time.
One of the things that I found really interesting about the lineups over the years is that you almost predicted which bands are going to explode in many ways. So the guests involved people like Kate Tempest and Stephen Malkmus, and it's really a very diverse set of artists. So a very interesting part is, how do you choose the artists every year, and how has the festival evolved? Because the lineup is becoming more interesting every year in a different sense. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, in the beginning it was like the two of us, and then my former girlfriend Teresa joined the team, and it was the three of us, and we put ideas together, and then it was like this kind of like mingling of like different worlds and see that it fits together. Like we always described it as like it's like curating a mixtape. It's the way we work, or we think, is like it's a selection of personal favorites, and we see that it match together. And the crossfader is, is making it all work together in the end. So, and that evolved over the years, because since 2018. I think for 2018 was the first year I curated it myself, or like maybe even 19. I think 19. 18 was like a small edition because that was the year when our friend Jörg passed away, and then 19 was like the first year I did it myself. And since then it's a little bit more challenging. We had a bigger venue, also that was like more challenging to find artists that work for the room, because like, if you have a big stage, it's, you have certain things like orchestras and like bigger projects, you can think big and dream up certain things. Like we had Artur Verocai, this Brazilian icon who recorded this amazing album in 1971, when we got an orchestra for him, and so certain things work really well. But like after a couple of years, we felt that a smaller space is more convenient, also because it's like the pressure on our shoulders is less. And I was like, I remembered like many years just running around, and my friends came, and I was like passing by, and I'm like, I'm back in 5 minutes, and I never showed up again because then there was something else. And since we moved to Stadtgarten, which is a capacity of 400, it's a little bit more, it's less costly, it's less stressful for anyone who is involved, but like also it's more enjoyable for me because I can really just see every artist that I invite. And before I had to there were often times where I just started watching an artist, and 5 minutes later I had to
the
run
problems
somewhere.
of being an organizer, you don't get to enjoy a minute of it.
So it's like it's challenging. And then I wish sometimes there were more people involved, and so if there's an investor somewhere out there, it was never my intention to do it myself, but it's hard to find someone who is shares the same values and share the same ideas, because a lot of festivals are like, I think they have a different, I wouldn't say they do it because they see it as a business opportunity. I think a lot of festivals in the past you could see as like something like, it has to work financially. And I think in our situation with this project, it was more like, let's do the things that we can not sell, but we can present to people in a way that we can that people see that it comes from the heart. And in the end, if we break even, it's fine, because it's with any funded projects, we're not allowed to earn money, but we have to break even. And that's the goal.
That's one of the statistics in that study, that 80% of the festivals now are in a non-profit situation, and only 20% of the festivals are actually profit-oriented. So I think it's really important that we see festivals and curated programming venues as a form of an art itself. Like you would see an exhibition in a museum. It's not simply a product placement, but it's an artistic expression. And I really like that you compare to the festival to a mixtape. I think that's the best description of the lineups over the years, because it's like taking the freedom to make a mixtape with a concept or with a certain vibe. And going back to the venue sizes, I personally like concerts between 250 and 500 people. And those are the venues that are really struggling to stay alive with the whole crisis. And one of the things I was talking about with a friend the other day is like David Byrne in his book, How Music Works. There's a chapter that talks about how space defines the performance. I really like that size, and I really like that feeling that you're still in the room. You're 30 meters away from the performer, so I think that's the perfect venue, especially when you are going for a communal festival. And I really believe that we should try to keep venues alive that are exactly that size. It's usually very good bands, but the number of tickets is too small to sustain big projects. So festivals are a really good way to keep it going. What was one of your favorite moments over the years of running the festival? Many, I guess.
Not losing money. I don't know. It's hard because it's like after so many years, there's so many. I couldn't name one, but it's just like looking back and see like how many moments I remember where there was joy, not only on the side of the artist but also the audience and like everywhere. So I think a lot of festivals that are out there, I think it's like they have certain slots and they fill the slots, and then it's you as an artist, you arrive and if it's good organized, you find your stuff and then you leave again, but you it's like kind of like doing your job and then you leave. But I think my as every artist who was invited always was like a a choice of, because of loving, because I love this artist or the particular music. It was more like I want the artist to leave with a smile and remember the time they spent here in Cologne. And I think that's with a lot of artists where I think, I wouldn't say like friendships, but like a lot of, even like after many years, I think they remember that time when they came here. And I think that's like a thing that I keep in my heart, knowing that I do it for a reason, and give this artist a playground or like a moment where it's not about like functioning, or like where it's kind of, this is here, do your job, please, here you get your money and leave. It's more like it's like they feel the family vibe. And I think everyone that I stayed in touch over the years, they remind me of, they remember me of certain moments when they talk about it, that they had a good time here, which means a lot to me.
Yeah, it's like it's not a commodity, like you tour, you go and you leave. It's more a communal experience.
Yeah.
And is that how the label started? Because a lot of the people who came to the festival, you released records with Weekend Records.
The label started in 2021. I mean, I worked for a label from 2001 to around 2011. And then around that time, I remember also for festivals, like these mediocre size labels, they had like a hard time, because as soon as you have like, you build up an artist, they left for a bigger label. Back then, I remember I was personally disappointed when that happened. But nowadays, I think it's more of like, I see how many of these artists had this a similar situation, that you have like one moment where your career can blow off, and then it's like, I'm like, okay, yeah, you should use that opportunity, because you don't know if it's gonna last. So, and so I was a little fed up working as a A&R and in that with this old label. But like, for some reason I started thinking of also like the record as like, oh, there's this thing that hasn't come out yet. Maybe it's a good opportunity. And I think the first release was sold out before it even came out. It was a recording by this artist, Julius Eastman, who we performed his music. He passed away in 1990. His music at the festival, it was like an idea that I had to have his music to be performed. The first time I had an artist that wasn't alive anymore, but I wanted to present his music. And then, the record went so well, so I continued to do so. And now I started to release also new music by younger artists, which is, it's challenging, but like I learned things from the past doing, or like, in certain moments, or like making decisions, like not investing too much. Of course, things can go better, but like a lot of times, when you see the world of like how much you have to invest. I talked to a friend of mine who works for a bigger label in Berlin, and he said the amount of money you have to invest these days for a newcomer artist to hopefully blow off, it's I don't know, it's so much you will never make back that money. So I think it's I'd rather be conservative about certain things and like keep the money together and have like a realistic kind of break even, because otherwise it's like, I don't have that money to give away. So I have to be, like a little more modest about certain things. But I think that's the only way to survive these days, because I think the time of big budgets is kind of over. And like you see that also in a world that, of course, it's all about like who's the next big thing and stuff. But like I think a lot of labels, they don't have the budget anymore. And sometimes I see this even as a promoter. A lot of artists who don't guarantee you 100 people is already a risk if you have shows with like 30, 40 people, I've had funding, but even with funding, I'm losing a lot of money. And it's even, that's why you're supposed to receive funding from the government or from the city. But it's still difficult. And that's a little worrying, because like I know that we have, luckily, this system in Germany, or like this possibility still, like who knows how long. But it's still like, if you compare it to like England or the US, where none of these venues or artists receive anything like that. So it's
really frustrating.
Yeah.
I just working on a study for the club scene in München. And one of the things we realized is that it becomes harder and harder to book shows because people don't buy tickets in advance. Young people don't have the budget. Inflation has really taken away the extra money people had to spend. So it's a really tricky situation at the moment, and things are not getting cheaper. Travel is not getting cheaper. So touring has become a big challenge, especially for venues up to 250 people. So it's exactly what you said. The people knowing you have a break even at the show before the day of the show is getting harder and harder to do. So you've made a few really interesting records, if I may say so. One, how did the Marshall Allen record come about that you did last year with from the Sun Orchestra?
I was at home. It was around around 2 years ago in December, like mid-December. I was at home, like doom scrolling on Discogs, and then I just figured out that Marshall Allen, who was 99 years old by that time, you look at this discography, there is like releases where he's part of, and then there's a live recording here and stuff like that. But then I realized that he never had, even in the 60s, he never had like an opportunity, but he never had an output by himself. So there was like no record that existed, and then I had this idea like, oh, how about we have him, the first 100-year-old artist to record a debut album, and then. The next moment, of course, I think even before I went to sleep, I contacted Noel Scott from the orchestra, who I had been in touch since they played the festival in 2019. And then he said, like, oh, talk to his son. And I did. And then it went like, as the ideas started rolling, there was at one point no way back, and I reserved the studio in Philadelphia. I booked my flight. We looked for the musicians. Noel was like really fast in finding the people. I said, I don't want this to be like an orchestra record, because there was like, again, it's like there are enough orchestra records, and I wanted a Marshall Allen record. And then only Noel knew how many songs Marshall had written over the years, and then he made a list of songs, and then we went through them, and it was really chaotic, and there wasn't much time. We had like 2 days, 2 afternoons, basically 3 or 4 to 9 o'clock, and it was like 2 days after his 100th birthday. So we went. The goal was like, let's just wait until he's 100. I went to his birthday party, and then 2 days later, and he was so tired. And like when I remember like picking him up at his house, he was so tired. But once he entered the studio, you could see what music can set free in even like an older person. Like when you see like, and it was like a flower. You see like a flower bloom. And leaves unfold. It was like he was like there, like he was like smiling and joking, and then we recorded everything, and then it was like half a year or for like 4 months of mixing and like editing and stuff, and that was like and it was like financially I was like, oh my god, what's gonna happen here? And it was like the most expensive thing I've ever done. But I mean, I don't know if I'm gonna break even with it, but I don't know. I don't mind. It was like I had a moment where I felt like other people, they invest in like, I don't know, buying houses or like having a stupid business idea, and then I realized like I'm investing in the heritage of jazz, which is like, to me, sounded like a good money investment.
It's really unique how a 100-year-old artist can breathe life suddenly in the studio and just open up, and you see the power of the spirit over the body and the magic. So I wouldn't have guessed, based on the videos I've seen from the recording, that someone was tired. It's completely the opposite. That's the crazy nature of art, and we never know what an album will make for the history of things. And you can never take one piece of history out and know how music evolves. So that's interesting. You also did a few...
Fingers crossed, by the way. On November 9th, we registered it for the Grammys this year. So there's a Grammy nomination coming up. So fingers crossed.
We should have done this interview after the Grammys. Beautiful. Another thing, a few days ago, you did a show with Susanne and Ciani in Cologne that I sadly missed. And she's also an artist who really made a difference working with Bukla from the beginning at his workshop and everything. How did that come about? She was at the festival and you also released her record. That's also a very interesting artist that had a huge influence. It's nice to see her getting the recognition she always deserved now from younger people. How did that come about?
Yeah, I have no idea how I knew of her, and I think in 2021, that was when we invited her to play. I knew that this guy, Till Kniola from the city of Cologne, from the cultural department, he had the idea to invite her and Manuel Götsching from Ashra Temple to the Philharmonic. And it didn't work out because Manuel Götsching got sick and then he got better, but they never found a way to reschedule it. And then I asked Till if he would be okay if I invite her to the festival. And he said yes. So then she played the festival, and it was like a magnificent moment where I remember that at one point people were cheering loudly, and it's also on the recording. And you rarely hear this kind of music with the. She has a lot of energy. She's turning 80 next year, and I spent 3 days with her last week, and she's it's unbelievable how it's another example of how music can keep you young. And it's also of course the lifestyle, but in other circumstances, but it's a very, she's a very not only influential person on a musical level. Making music at a time where, and it's funny because I just edited our interview. I made an interview with her yesterday for my radio show I have a radio show in New York, East Village Radio, and we talked for an hour or 2 hours, and by the time when she started, she was the only woman doing what she did, and there were not many men out there who supported what she did. So she had a hard time finding clients, and she wanted to do movie soundtracks, and she said in this way, she said I was so ready to do it, but as soon as I knocked on doors, people kind of, it was a woman doing this, they were no. And it's really sad that even when you think of, on one side you have an appreciation for these artists who some of them are still alive, and then there's one amazing thing that you can make these shows possible now with the setup is a little smaller than back then. And I think she's really thrilled to be acknowledged and to receive that kind of understanding and interest from a younger generation that she hardly received when she started making music.
For our listeners' context, we are talking about ambient music made with modular synthesizers. And Susanne Ciani was a pioneer of the West Coast synthesis, which is kind of the opposite to the famous Moog brand. So it's a form of more abstract synthesis and some of the most intelligent and intuitive user interfaces. And one other thing she faced is that the musicians union back then, when she started, they made a rule that if a person was playing an electronic instrument, they would have to get paid for any overdub, making it impossible for them to make money because no one would pay them that much. So they were blocked both for their gender, both for the technology, because there was the trend that keyboards are going to substitute musicians. So facing those challenges back then. And so it's interesting from a cultural management perspective to understand that when we see a keyboard on stage nowadays, that was the equivalent of seeing an AI as an opponent today. And AI cannot substitute a musician, nor can a keyboard, but it's about how we use technology to express ourselves. So when we talk about artists like that, they faced backslash in ways we can't expect today. And people have taken their music as reference. They went deep. They treasure it now. But it was impossible for them to make a living back then. And it's to the point where I know for the specific artist, normal keyboard, I think Yamaha sponsored an artist like that, so that the modern keyboards that were being made like that were not taking things out of the market. Or I'm speculating here, so allegedly.
One funny thing she told me is like, because I didn't know that these unions were like really that set up, like that you had a different union for each part of these jingles that she was creating then. So she invented a name for herself, creating because she told me like how these people, they were like the singers or who spoke the text or like the on those jingles, they made like a fortune. And then she had a name for them. She said during the breaks they went to the Canal Street to buy jewelry because they made so much money. The Chosen Ones or something, like, I don't know, she had a name for them, and it was like really, and so she invented a fake name for herself so she could record those jingles with her voice and make a better cut from that than she was receiving from when she was just doing the music, which is like the main thing. It's crazy.
I think we should study those things deeper because you see how true artists are faced with legal, moral problems that actually make things non-viable. And then a few years later, when things change, we take everything for granted. So it's really interesting to go back and look like that. I think her most famous jingle was that popping sound of Coca-Cola that she's famous for. That's not actually the bottle, that's a synthesizer. So for anybody out there thinking we're talking about abstract art, those things become mainstream in ways no one could ever imagine for artists who are so influential and come from the sidelines of innovation. So really interesting stuff. And it's really interesting to see then how a festival like this can give people a stage where they kind of feel like this should be my reality many years ago in many ways. But that's the beauty of communal work and inspiring curation. So one question is that you've always had volunteers helping out. How important has the team behind Weekend Fest be, the people who helped all over the years? In the study I mentioned earlier, it's proven that volunteering and funding, like Jan mentioned, has become one of the main reasons festivals around Germany can actually still exist. And what's the story behind volunteering at Weekend Festival?
I mean, the team is I mean, one nice thing about being able to do what I do is I can pick the people that I want to work with. So no, I'm not thrown in like a pond where I have to look left and right and like have to work with people that I don't like. So that's one good thing, that the team which we are working with, it's around like 10, 15 people. A lot of them, if not most of them are like still the same people since we started. So and that of course is like building, like even like a lot of times I think now at this point where I'm curating most of the things myself, and most of the decisions that I make myself. But like it's good to have a team behind you, even they don't share the risk. But I mean, the risk got smaller over the years, like I said before. But like, it's good to have, like constant companions who are there. And of course, everybody gets paid. We don't, when you say volunteering, we have volunteers, for example, who like at the night of the festival that we have like someone who's helping to, stand at the door, look for tickets or stuff. But like we don't have anyone working for free. So I think in this environment, especially we get funded, I have to calculate it that way, that I make sure that everybody gets paid. It's like, I don't know if you, I wish I had maybe the opportunity when I was 16, 17. 16 was the year when I was 16. I first came to Cologne, and there was this festival called Popcom, and it was back then in the 90s a big marketing come together for record companies. Back then, I said a high time of CD sales, where you can, when you think of the cost of a CD and how much there were in the shops, it was like insane.
The profit margin was amazing.
It's like something you cannot think of anymore when you produce, especially if you produce vinyl. It's really not comparable. But what I wanted to say is, like, back then, coming here to the city, and I saw this city, particular Cologne, that I still love after being here for nearly, like, this year is the 30th anniversary of the first time I came to Cologne. And of course the city changed, but I wanted to say like that I always, for me, it was that city where I arrived, and there was like all these music magazines, and there was music television, and so I always have that picture of the city in the back of my mind. There's this, like, the reason why I came was music, and that's 30 years later, still one of the heart moments for me, where I'm like, when I think of Cologne, I want to keep this spirit alive for myself with what I'm doing.
I think Cologne has a really eclectic audience, and part of why really interesting things can happen here is that it's a really, I wouldn't say educated, but a very open-minded audience. And I think that's the same reason I moved here. It's nice when you can walk to a concert, and the size of a city is really, I like cities who are up to 1 or 2 million, because you still can walk and you still can have a feeling of belonging. And Cologne is also known for the Vedel culture, which means like it's still a neighborhood. You still have the feeling you belong somewhere. And music is an essential part of that. And if you think of krautrock and Stockhausen and how many things have started here, it's a really beautiful city to live in. And I think the audience is really interesting. I'm always stunned at what things are possible. I go to concerts where I expect not a lot of people, and there's a bigger audience than I thought for certain things.
But then also sometimes I think, and that's like a little like the moments where I'm a little sad, that I think a lot of times there are like amazing musicians coming to town, and I hardly see any reception. And I don't know if it's maybe the amount of shows that are, because I used to have, like, when you mentioned in the beginning, the King Georg, I did like, I think one year I did like 40 or over 40 shows one year. And nowadays I do just 10 a year for my own series. I have one at the Stadtgarten where the festival is. So there's another 10. So it's like 20 concerts and a festival, which is still a lot, like, after like doing this for like 15 plus years. And the passion remains the same, and it's maybe even like sometimes you're disappointed by the turnout. It's as long as the passion's there, I keep going.
I think it's impossible to predict how shows can go, especially with the level. I think what changed a lot is the media consumption. Like, it's very different if someone watches or listens to music not from a record or a CD, but online, and the click and the social media changes the level of exposure. So I think we're getting to a point where our brains are tired from media consumption, and I think that affects attendance. And it's also that younger people have completely different habits, especially after Corona. So I think it's very hard to predict, but I think a good series of concerts and the consistency builds up a different quality of an audience. And because the hard thing is to get attention, but if people are aware of a series, Jan just mentioned a series called Always Coming Back to You, and I think that kind of explains the concept in the name, that I'm always offering something, and the audience kind of like expects a curated version of something, which I think from mixtapes to radio, that's what we lack recommendations, because you kind of see traits.
And I think still in a time where I remember when Spotify, like maybe 10 years ago, when I was using Spotify more frequently than I just said that I quit my subscription last week, but it was like still like kind of there was someone behind making these playlists, and like at a time where, and I'm not anti-AI, but I think a lot of things get so replaceable that you don't, and you feel that. I talked with Susanne Ciani also about it. She's like, AI is just as good because it's good to replicate something that is already there. It's not that things get newly invented. It's like, you can say like, make me a Beatles song that sounds like the Beatles, and AI can do that. But like the AI just needs references to do something. But it is with us people in any way, not only musically, culturally, but also as a society to evolve as a society and get further with what we're doing. And we can only do that if we take for granted what was happening in the past. But I think it's important to find new ways. And I think it's just like nowadays, all these ways of consuming music is like, I don't know, I lost my passion in it. And even like I'm still buying records. I don't have the time to listen so carefully as back then, when I had like an album that I bought, like, and I had to save my money, and after like 2 weeks you're like, I finally have it. So there's a different reception, but I think it's with this things that are available on every level, it's tiring for people also. I think when I think of being 20 now and growing up with like wireless available anywhere and everything is there, I don't even have to search for it. It's a different way of growing up, but like I'm happy that I had like the opportunity to or like had many situations where I had to wait or like find something or dig something out. Maybe that's the character that is still like part of me, that I'm interested in searching and researching and like finding things that are like maybe a little hidden and make them visible again. But I think it's a weird time we're living right now, like where you're overly saturated by music. Like there's not a room where in the gym you hear music everywhere. It's like, and it's not really cool to have music to be used in so many like background moments.
To quote Radiohead, it buzzes like a fridge everywhere, that it's almost like background noise. And I think it leads to a form of option paralysis, that you just sit there. And I was talking to a friend who asked me, it's like, why aren't people buying records? And I told him as a joke, it's like trying to sell books in front of a library. Because let's take Spotify as an example. It's like you have the library, with millions of tracks, and you're trying to sell a record for $25, which is 3 months of subscription.
At 25, I mean,
which
the record 35.
They cost 20 to make. So the point is, it's at a point where you're fighting a freemium economy, and it's very hard for people to appreciate their art, an artist, and pay him when they can pay rent, and when they're fighting with inflation. And it's a really, really hard time for business models that are. But I think what you said, curation and attention to detail will always find a way to survive, and copying other people's work with AI and replicating it is definitely not something that... I made the example of poetry. You can make AI copy a poet's work, but it feels like nothing. And I think we're getting to a point where we will need more innovation and more surprising forms of art. And if you think about how much music there is in the world, from Brazil to Japan, there's more there. And life will progress, and I think people are obsessed with AI just like machines. It's powerful. It's a miracle that we got there, but it doesn't substitute human consciousness and human...
That's true, yeah.
And going back to what you said about a 100-year-old artist going to a studio and blossoming like a young boy exploring, I don't think a set of data can do that and create that magic.
And I think it's like, I mean, you feel that every once in a while, and I think that people also like get tired, and that's also like a thing I remember when I talked with Susanne, Ciani, who has like with her age being 80 next year, she has that possibility to look back, and she also sees that younger people have the want or need to have certain things again that they didn't find in current music or in the current world, where it's like the simplicity of like this synthesizer that's like 60 years old, or that's like fascinates you because there's a purity in the presentation that it's pure, you can understand it, and it's still like, it's like it has
it's tactile. You can touch it, you can feel it, it has a vibe.
Yeah.
It's not another screen that you switch with your email.
And it's like, and you have the machine on one side, but you have that person behind that machine who brings in the warmth that makes these machines like an emotional object in a way. And that's one thing that we can't get from consuming AI-generated products, because, I mean, I just don't, but I'm also like not interested in, like, I think I don't see a reason why we as mankind should be get rid of ourselves. And that's what we see right now, I mean, there was like sounds like an old man talking, but like I was at the airport 2 days ago and I had this really wonderful artist, Sister Nancy, who maybe people know from the hit Bam Bam, who also, in other ways, like she recorded this 45 years ago, and now you have kids at around 20 who are like raving to her tune. And so I was like waiting 2 hours at the airport, and there's like a box, maybe half of the size of the studio or a quarter, and it's like a robot serving you coffee in this and the coffee, it was not bad. I was like, I already had too much coffee, but I wanted to try it out, so I got a double espresso, and I saw this machine like serving me coffee, and then there was a woman with her child behind me, and I said, after I got the coffee, I said, "Thank you very much." And I said, like, that's the one thing maybe one day you get a nice hello back, but like, I'm like, that's part of me buying a coffee in a shop, I can make coffee myself at home, but part of why you get a coffee outside is to socialize with the people who you met at the cafe, but also who work there. It's like part of you tip them because, like, you get a smile, or like someone's nice to you and like in the best way, you like communicate with that person a bit. But like, yeah, it's like reaching points where I'm like, yeah, if it's just about consuming the actual thing, it's too less for me. And that goes back to the festival again, like, or like if anything I do, I can't get that human part out of what I'm doing. I mean, this is like essential for me. I don't see music as a product. I don't see running a festival as a business model. I don't see a record label as a opportunity to get rich. I just hope that other people out there maybe have the same feeling about, or like when I send out the signals that they see, hey, this is like someone who deeply cares about what he's doing. That's what I want to maybe people to see in my work. And I hope that's also what I'm seeking for when I look for the music. Because there's a lot of music and it sounds technically good to have a Dutch band that is fronted by like a Turkish woman, and it's like, oh, it's like, it sounds so, and they do everything right, but like, to me it's like a made up thing. I mean, there was always like pop stars who wanted to sound like other pop stars, but the originality is like kind of, it's so easy to find. I mean, I always feel like when people send me links with music, check this out, and it's a good party band and they do good at festivals, and I'm like, I hear it 1 second and I'm like, sorry to say, this is that music. It's like music designed to be successful, where you be like, I want to play big festivals, and it's so replaceable. It's like, there's no heart behind it. I feel like it's like it's like, let's make this. And then, of course, this always existed. You go back to the 80s, or like, you'd be like, there's Talk, and there's like other bands who sound like that. But then there is, I mean, this is like a thing that has been always going on in the music business. But like, I think you could recognize with the understanding as from being around for a while, you recognize if something's pretends to be something or not.
I think authenticity, our whole brain is wired to find something authentic, whether it's a glass of wine, music, communication. I think we're so interested in a unique experience, and there's nothing like the real thing. And I think what a lot of the music industry was about is exactly what they're trying to do with AI. Just copy things, whether it's exploiting black music or forms of other music. And to go back to the festival, I think you have a few very interesting electronic pioneers in this edition. Would you like to talk about that? Because now that we talked about machine, let's go back to the 80s and the beginnings of techno.
That's good you say that, because I remember I watched, there's a documentary on Carl Craig, who is like one of our artists this year. And also when I was 16 in 1995, that year when I first came to Cologne, I was obsessed with his music, and I was too young to go to clubs, or maybe I could have gone, but like I didn't had someone who I could join. So I was like staying at home, and it was the year where a lot of these artists produced albums for often major labels. And there was like this album by Carl Craig called Land Cruising, and it was like for me it was like, of course with someone who had no history in, or like no understanding in electronic music, it was like a very interesting way of finding, exploring electronic music as a home listening experience. And so he was like very important to me also in his documentary. That's what I wanted to say. There is a quote, and it's a song called Desire. And a couple of people, they say, like Laurent Garnier, he says, I think it's that was the moment where I felt like I can hear this guy he's able to make machines cry. And it's like true when you hear that song, and it's like really kind of like, it's like the way it's like presented. So it's like very, and I felt like looking back, that's what I loved with the music, because I always had like an emotional appeal to music. And like even for techno, I could hear the difference, and that was, yeah. And it's interesting, like with this perspective 30 years later, the music still has a relevance to me. This artist, I think he paved a lot of ways for other artists who came after him. And the same for a guy called Gerald, who I remember even when I was 10 hearing, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but like around the age of 10, there was a couple of, because I always watched music television on the weekends. And I remember I heard of Voodoo Ray around the same time as I heard of Good Life by Inner City. And it was that time when rave culture started. I was, of course, way too young, but they played these songs on the radio. And I kind of remember that time of like being a child and like, I mean, too young to go out, but kind of like, you know, you hear it in dance music. There was a lot of electronic dance music around that time. Was in the charts, and like that's like a maybe a homage for me too, to have like Carl Craig on Friday and a guy called Gerald on Saturday, to have these two, for me, like iconic people who shaped a certain style of music. And the other love that I have is in recent years listen to a lot of jazz, is a homage to the label Strata East, who is like a highly influential jazz label from New York. They started in 1971 by Charles Tolliver and wait.
Name,
cut this later.
We'll cut it.
Charles Tolliver and name dropped. It's like a label that has been like very dear to my heart for many years. And I went to New York this year in January for the Winter Jazz Festival, and I didn't meet him there, but I went to his show. It was 2 nights of Strata East celebration of the label's life. But on the last day, I sent him an email, and the last day I was there, I received a phone call, and I was walking through Manhattan. Since then we stayed in touch, and I came back, and we worked on this program that we're going to present in 2 weeks. And it's amazing to be able to do this. That's one moment where I'm like, I'm very happy to be able to do this, because I'm really able to choose what I like and who I want to see at this festival. And yeah.
It's really interesting I will put some links to the festival and the label, because it's really interesting that you very often bring artists together. I think that what you said about the mixtape in the beginning really suits it. You also brought out Fred Firth's record. You reissued it. That's another record that's really interesting. A very influential guitarist. How did that come about?
Yeah, Fred Firth also played the festival the same year as when I met Fred Firth. I met at the same year when I met when I had the Sunra Orchestra play, and so yeah, after that year, you see it like with the label. I have made a record with Marshall. I realized that Fred Firth's debut album, Guitar Solos, hasn't been available since 1974, and I found this a good opportunity to release it. So in the beginning of the label, I always tried to look at these artists and what I can do with them. So I released the debut album by this band Slap Happy, who is also the kind of same breeze as Fred Firth was when he was in Henry Cow. And then like this new artist Neue Grafik, who I'm working with from London, who is also playing the festival. I invited him to the festival, and then he sent me a link to his unreleased music, his new music he's working on, and I'm like, okay, I want to put it out. So that's like, I think the connection of it's like, whatever is going on, even if the record that I could work on, I'm on fire, and I try to combine as much as possible.
If you look at the catalog of your label, it almost is impossible to predict what you're going to put out next.
That's true, yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about also is the residence concept that you had, that you brought in artists to record different things over the years. I remember doing sound for, how do you pronounce the three ladies?
Le Fil de Iligadat.
Thank you for saving me this one. It was really interesting, who were from Africa, and they played with a complete... I remember doing sound for them at King George, and the feeling with which they played guitar was so different. So tell us about the residence program, where you sometimes bring artists to the studio for a few days. Tell us a few stories from there.
The idea was to have, like I said, I want artists to come to the city and to present the music. And then at one point I felt maybe this can be extended by, having them come to the city and stay a little longer. And some of these ideas were studio residencies. Then we had one thing that was like a more like free-form thing, where we build a studio with the artist, or like a mobile studio. And then the last couple of years, the residency was more like a kind of like, they come to the city, they meet with artists from Cologne, collaborate with them, record with them, perform with them. I think the overall thought behind this is to give artists a longer time to spend time in the city, and to come up with new ideas, or with other ideas that they maybe wouldn't have come up with if they did it at another place. Of course, it's all like every decision leads to a new perspective, and that's, I think, what I like with the project that I do, that I have an idea and I bring it up to someone, and not everybody is like into it, but like a lot of times I get the response that they like these ideas, and they be like excited to get out of their comfort zone.
I think for people listening, Jan is an art director, and he has worked also as an A&R, as he mentioned earlier, and he's done the covers for many artists. Some of them are pretty famous, like Stephen. I think you did one for Stephen Malkmus, if I remember. Two. And other artists. So I think what is interesting about your work, and that's why your website, I Do Many Things, is interesting, that you approach it in the same way, like a curator or an editor. And in the end, from the curation of a festival to a cover, you kind of take the same approach. And I think it's very jazz-inspired in the spirit, like take it like a form of improvisation and then go with it, even if it's a video and stuff. So it's really interesting to see how the different skill sets fuse into a certain way of thinking and approaching decisions over the years. So that was more a statement what I made, but I think that was what I found really interesting in inviting you, because you have a creator's perspective, and I think the communal aspect, and that gives people, especially working in the audience development part of an orchestra or of more established institutions, a little bit of the grassroots spirit that helps keeping people engaged, or engaging people with a very diverse background. And part of the ambition of this podcast is to give ideas from the underground. We met in clubs where you were organizing concerts, and I was doing sound back then. So I think getting that spirit up to the concert halls, to the art and museum places, I think that integration and that spirit is really important. So
absolutely, yeah.
And I think that's what we should encourage. Exactly what you said, AI can copy, but how about bringing people together, making things happen? And that was the link to cultural management, that hopefully giving some inspiration from having been in the record industry, working with the record industry, and as a promoter, and then seeing all the nuances that make that make actually art progress and evolve beyond what any AI form can replicate. And one of the things that I think is really interesting for the generation that is now 20 or 30, they have access to music the way people a couple of centuries ago started having access to books. And it's a form of aesthetic music literacy that you have the privilege to hear so many genres of music. So I don't think we need pop as much and things to be popular. We just need sustainable, diverse music, and I think that's what we should strive for as both creators, artists, promoters. So what would you like to tell us about the festival, to do a little bit of promotion at the end of the podcast? Just some simple facts, dates and artists, so people can take a listen if you're living in Cologne, or if you're somewhere else, just explore the artists and get yourself into a rabbit hole of discovering new and old music. So who is a guest this year?
So I already mentioned a guy called Jared and Carl Craig. I have also this legendary jazz trumpeter and arranger, Charles Tolliver, who's going to perform with a 10-piece big band. Then I have a young band from Scandinavia called Smurts. It's like two women. And then I have Angel Bat David from Chicago, who is teaming up with Naima Nefertari, who is the daughter also of Nene Cherry, who I worked with on Marshall Allen's album. And who else? I have a great young woman that I discovered this year on my summer holiday when I basically had everything together. And then my girlfriend said, like, "Oh, did you hear Céline Desberg?" Céline Desberg is she's living in France and she makes beautiful music. I can highly recommend her to check her out. And then I have Emma-Jean Thackeray, who is a British, let's say like blue-eyed soul, if you can say so, but like a lot of black music inspired musician who is friends with Giles Peterson, who is also a great supporter of a couple of things that I did this year, including the record with Marshall Allen. And so it's a diverse and undefinable thing. But in the end, it's like I put it together, give it a design, or find an artist who provides a beautiful design, and then for me it works. It's like the mixtape is complete. The dates November 7th and 8th here in Cologne, and if you're an open-minded person, come by and let the magic work.
I think the beautiful thing about music is that we all love recommendation, and we always love to hear someone give us an idea that might inspire us. So even if you can't recognize a name, or it's not important. I think the important thing is to keep up an open mind and an open ear to discovery. And I don't think anything is better than being surprised. And I want to thank you for this talk and taking the time. I think we, as a society, have to try to keep creating intellectual work and emotionally rich content instead of relying on AI as a commodity. And that was burning. We'll cut that. So what I wanted to say is that authentic content and beautiful content in music is important. Thank you all for burning. So thank you for listening to the podcast. Jan, thank you for coming over. And
thank you for the invitation. Now someone wants some attention.
Yeah.